Kaya shivered in the damp alley, her knees pressed to the cold, grime-streaked ground. The flickering neon glow of alien script painted her violet skin in alternating shades of pink and blue, highlighting the green streaks in her long, tangled hair. Once, those streaks had been a mark of beauty among her people, the Celians. Now, they clung to her face like remnants of a life long lost. She wrapped her tattered robe tighter around her slender frame, feeling the coarse fabric scrape against her scales. Her stomach growled, a low, painful sound that had become a constant companion over the past few weeks. The streets of Lumark, a bustling trade hub on the barren planet Graxis V, teemed with life. Various alien species bustled about, some walking on three legs, others floating just above the ground. The air reeked of oil, alcohol, and desperation, a perfect reflection of the world she found herself trapped in. Graxis V had no rules, no governments, just credits and the cruelty of those who had more than they needed. Kaya tightened her grip on her robe. She had fled her homeworld years ago, escaping a civil war that had torn her people apart. The Celian colonies had once been prosperous, united by a deep reverence for nature and a shared commitment to peace. But peace was fragile, and when resources dwindled, old grievances surfaced. Rival factions rose, and the bloodshed that followed consumed everything Kaya had known. Her parents had perished in a bombing. Her sister had vanished into the chaos. Kaya had barely made it off-world with her life. Now she was here, stranded on a foreign planet with no money, no connections, and no future. Her claws trembled as she watched the faceless crowds shuffle past. She had tried begging for food, receiving only jeers in response. She had tried offering her skills as a navigator, but no one cared to hire a starving Celian who reeked of desperation. Now, her pride eroded like a cliffside battered by waves. She was down to her last, desperate option. "Please," she murmured to a passing Radian, her voice raw and unsteady. "Food for anything." The Radian sneered, his four nostrils flaring as he looked her up and down. "Not worth the trouble," he hissed before striding away. Kaya swallowed the lump in her throat. She was used to the disdain, the leers, the disgust. But tonight, she was too hungry to care. Her sharp claws gripped the edges of her robe as she tried again with another passerby, her voice hoarse but louder this time. "Anything you want. Just feed me." No one stopped. The weight of failure crushed her chest, making it hard to breathe. She slumped against the damp wall, her vision blurring with tears. In her mind, flashes of her old life emerged. Her mother singing softly, her father's strong hand guiding her as they worked together in the fields. She clenched her teeth, forcing the memories away. They were gone, and remembering wouldn't bring them back. "Are you always this hard on yourself? Or is today special?" The voice startled her. She looked up to find a human standing at the alley's entrance, the glow of a nearby sign reflecting in his warm brown eyes. He wasn't imposing, average height, messy hair, dressed in a patched-up jacket and worn boots, but something about the calm in his gaze made her pause. "Go away," she muttered, pulling her robe tighter. He didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer, crouching to meet her at eye level. "You don't look like you belong here," he said, his voice steady but not unkind. "I don't belong anywhere," Kaya replied, her claws tightening around the fabric at her knees. The man tilted his head, studying her with quiet curiosity. Then he reached into his jacket. Kaya tensed, ready to flee if he pulled a weapon, but what he produced wasn't a blaster. It was a small silver ration pack. He extended it toward her. "Here, take it." Kaya's eyes darted between the pack and his face. "Why?" she asked, suspicion lacing her voice. "You look hungry," he said simply. Her claws hesitated as she stared at the offering. No one on Graxis V gave anything for free. "What do you want in return?" The human shook his head. "Nothing. Just eat." Kaya's stomach twisted painfully, urging her to accept. She snatched the pack from his hand, her movements quick and defensive. Tearing it open, she devoured the contents in a frenzy, the taste of processed nutrients feeling like the finest delicacy after weeks of deprivation. The man leaned back against the wall, watching her with a faint smile. "Name's Carter," he said after a moment. "What's yours?" She hesitated, licking the last crumbs from her claws. "Kaya," she muttered, avoiding his gaze. "Well, Kaya," Carter said, his tone casual but deliberate, "you don't strike me as the kind of person who belongs in an alley, offering yourself for scraps." Kaya bristled. "You don't know anything about me." "True," Carter admitted, "but I know desperation when I see it, and I know how it feels to have nowhere to turn." His words pierced through her defenses, making her heart clench. She had no reason to trust him. Humans were unpredictable, and life had taught her that trust was a liability. But something about the sincerity in his voice made her hesitate. "You're not from here, are you?" he asked. Kaya shook her head. "No, my home." Her voice faltered. "It doesn't exist anymore." Carter's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. He straightened, offering her his hand. "Come with me," he said. Kaya recoiled slightly. "Why? You don't even know me." "Maybe not," Carter said, "but I've got a ship, and you look like you could use a fresh start." Her instincts screamed at her to refuse, to retreat back into the shadows where it was safer. But safety hadn't fed her. Safety hadn't saved her from years of pain and loneliness. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice sharp. Carter smirked. "No catch. Just a chance to get off this rock." Kaya stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing with doubts and fears. Yet beneath it all, a tiny ember of hope flickered to life. Against her better judgment, she reached out and clasped his hand, its warmth startling against her cold, scaled skin. "Fine," she said, her voice low but firm. "But if you try anything, I'll make you regret it." Carter chuckled, his grip steady but gentle. "Fair enough. Let's go." As he led her out of the alley, Kaya glanced back at the darkness she was leaving behind. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest glimmer of something she had long thought lost: a future. Kaya perched on the edge of a wobbly chair outside a rundown diner, the neon sign above flickering erratically in Graxis V's perpetual gloom. She held the second ration pack Carter had handed her, its metallic wrapper gleaming in the dim light. Despite her initial reluctance, she had devoured the first pack entirely, the unfamiliar taste still lingering on her tongue. Carter leaned casually against a rusted railing a few feet away, sipping from a dented cup that emitted a faint, spicy aroma. His calm demeanor irritated her. He acted as if they were friends, as if her trust could be earned so easily. "You're staring," Carter said without looking up, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. Kaya bristled, tightening her grip on the ration pack. "You're too casual," she snapped. "Casual keeps me alive," Carter replied, finally meeting her gaze. His brown eyes were steady, but they held an undercurrent of mischief. "Besides, you're the one sitting here eating my food. Relax, I'm not going to sell you to the highest bidder." Her claws flexed involuntarily. She didn't want to admit it, but that possibility had crossed her mind. "You still haven't explained why you helped me," she said, her voice sharper than intended. Carter shrugged, setting his cup on the railing. "Does it matter?" "It does to me." He studied her for a moment, as though weighing how much to say. "I've been where you are," he said finally, his voice softer. "Hungry, desperate, looking for a way out. Someone helped me once. I'm just paying it forward." Kaya narrowed her eyes. "I don't believe you." "That's fair," Carter admitted, his grin returning. "Trust doesn't come cheap, does it?" Her gaze drifted to the bustling street beyond the diner. Aliens of every shape and size hurried past, their faces shadowed by hoods or obscured by breathing apparatuses. Graxis V was a place where anonymity thrived, where secrets clung to everyone like the smog in the air. It was no place for trust. "Where are you from?" Carter asked, his tone casual but curious. Kaya stiffened. "Why do you care?" "Call it professional interest. You don't see many Celians this far out." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Not surprising. Most of us are dead." Carter didn't flinch, but his expression grew somber. "The war?" Kaya nodded, her gaze fixed on the chipped edge of the ration pack in her hands. "We fought over resources, land, water, food. The colonies tore each other apart until there was nothing left but ashes and corpses. You lost family, Carter said, not as a question, but as a quiet statement. Her throat tightened, and she swallowed hard. Everyone. My parents. My sister. He didn't offer empty platitudes or meaningless condolences. Instead, he stood silently, giving her space to speak or stay silent. She glanced at him, the flickering neon catching on his weathered features. What about you? Where's your family? Carter's expression flickered, a momentary shadow crossing his face. Long gone, he said simply. Kaya wanted to press him, to ask what had happened, but something in his tone told her he wouldn't answer. Instead, she focused on the food in her hands, forcing herself to eat slowly, deliberately, as her thoughts churned. You know, Carter said after a pause, you don't have to stay here. Kaya frowned. And go where? My ship, he said, straightening. The Stardust. It's not much, but it flies, and I could use someone who knows their way around navigation. She scoffed. You don't even know if I can navigate. He grinned. Call it a hunch. Kaya leaned back, crossing her arms. Why would you trust me? You don't even know me. Carter shrugged again, his easy demeanor returning. People are predictable. You're not looking to stab me in the back. You're looking for a chance to survive. I can work with that. His confidence grated on her nerves. What's in it for you? I told you, he said. I need a navigator. And maybe some company. Kaya snorted. Company. You want me to believe this is about loneliness? Believe what you want, Carter said, pushing off the railing. But the offer stands. She studied him, her sharp eyes searching for deceit in his words, his posture, his tone. All she saw was calm certainty. It unnerved her. If you're lying, she said, her voice low and dangerous, you'll regret it. Carter smirked. I'm starting to think I like you, Kaya. The corner of her mouth twitched, though she quickly forced it into a scowl. Don't push your luck. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that echoed in the alley. Fair enough. Come on. The Stardust isn't much, but it's better than this place. Kaya hesitated, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her chest. Trusting anyone felt reckless, but staying on Graxis V guaranteed only one thing, death. She stood, clutching the empty ration pack like a lifeline. If you try anything, you'll make me regret it, Carter finished, a playful glint in his eye. Yeah, I got it. For the first time in years, Kaya felt the faintest flicker of hope. It was small, fragile, and terrifying, but it was there. Without another word, she followed Carter into the crowded street, leaving the alley, and her fear behind. Kaya followed Carter up the creaking ramp of the Stardust, her claws gripping the strap of her bag as she stepped into the dim interior. The ship's airlock hissed shut behind her, sealing her inside a new reality. The hum of the engines pulsed faintly, a mechanical heartbeat that set her teeth on edge. The corridor ahead was narrow, with exposed pipes running along the walls and ceiling. Faint scorch marks marred the metal panels, scars from some long-forgotten battle. A flickering light overhead cast erratic shadows, making the passage seem more like a maze than the interior of a starship. This is home, Carter said, spreading his arms as if welcoming her to a palace. Kaya raised an eyebrow, her green-streaked hair brushing her shoulders as she tilted her head. This? He grinned. It grows on you. The skepticism etched on her violet face was impossible to miss. The Stardust didn't exactly inspire confidence. It looked held together by a mix of sheer willpower and salvaged parts from a scrapyard. Carter walked ahead, his boots clanging on the metal floor. I know it's not much to look at, but trust me, this ship has more life in her than you'd think. Kaya trailed behind, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. Her gaze lingered on an exposed wire sparking faintly in the corner. More life, or just a lot of duct tape holding it together? Carter chuckled. A little of both. Come on, let me show you around. They entered a small common area that looked like a cross between a mechanic's workshop and a lived-in living room. A sagging couch sat in one corner, surrounded by crates doubling as tables. Tools, spare parts, and empty cups cluttered every available surface. A well-worn map of some star system was tacked haphazardly to the wall, the edges curling. Kaya sniffed the air, catching the faint metallic tang of engine grease mixed with the musty scent of old fabric. "Charming," she muttered, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Don't judge her too harshly," Carter said, brushing a stray wrench off a chair and gesturing for Kaya to sit. "The Stardust has seen more action than half the fleet ships out there. She's reliable where it counts." Kaya hesitated before sitting, her sharp claws curling against her palm. The chair creaked under her weight, but held steady. She leaned back slightly, her tail curling around the base of the chair, a nervous habit she hadn't broken since childhood. Carter sat across from her, his grin softening into something less performative. "You don't look convinced." "I'm not," Kaya said bluntly. She gestured to the cluttered space around them. "This doesn't exactly scream safe." "Safe is boring," Carter said, leaning back with a smirk. Kaya narrowed her eyes. "Safe is alive." "Fair point," he admitted, holding up his hands. "But this ship's gotten me through tight spots more times than I can count. She might not look like much, but she's solid." Kaya studied him, her skepticism warring with a faint curiosity. His confidence was irritating, but there was something about the way he spoke, like he truly believed every word. Carter stood, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket. "Let me show you the cockpit. That's where the real magic happens." Kaya followed him through another narrow corridor, her claws clicking softly against the floor. They passed a storage room packed with crates and a small galley where an ancient coffee machine sputtered quietly. "This is it," Carter said as they stepped into the cockpit. The space was compact but functional, with a pilot's chair in the center and a co-pilot's seat to its right. Control panels surrounded the chairs, their buttons glowing faintly in shades of green and blue. A large viewport stretched before them, revealing the dull gray horizon of Graxis V and the faint shimmer of stars beyond. Kaya's gaze softened as she stepped closer, her claws brushing the edge of the co-pilot's console. Despite the ship's outward appearance, the cockpit had a strange charm. The controls were well-maintained, their surfaces polished from frequent use. Carter dropped into the pilot's chair, spinning it around to face her. "What do you think?" "It's better than the rest of the ship," she admitted grudgingly. "I'll take that as a compliment," Carter said with a grin. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know your way around a star chart?" Kaya bristled at the question. "Of course I do. I trained as a navigator before." Her voice faltered, and she looked away. "Before everything went to hell," Carter finished for her, his voice gentle. Kaya shot him a sharp look, but didn't deny it. Her claws tapped against the console as she tried to shove the memories back down. "Take the seat," Carter said, his tone casual but firm. Kaya hesitated. Something about the offer felt too symbolic, like sitting there meant accepting more than just a job. But the pull of familiarity was too strong. She lowered herself into the co-pilot's chair, her claws gliding over the controls. The system was simpler than she was used to, but the layout felt intuitive. Carter watched her quietly, his grin softening into something closer to admiration. "You look like you belong there." Kaya ignored him, focusing instead on adjusting the settings. "The navigation system is outdated," she said, her voice clipped. "You're running a risk flying blind like this." "That's why I brought you on board," Carter said. Kaya turned to him, her green eyes narrowing. "You're assuming I'll stay." "I have a good feeling," Carter said with an infuriating grin. Before Kaya could respond, the ship jolted violently, throwing her forward against the console. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the cockpit. "What was that?" Kaya demanded, her claws gripping the edges of the console. "Uninvited guests," Carter said, his tone suddenly serious. He flipped a switch, and a screen lit up, showing 3 sleek ships closing in fast. "Raiders," Kaya growled, her tail lashing against the seat. "Looks like they want to welcome you to the team," Carter said, his grin returning despite the tension. Kaya's claws flew over the controls, her instincts taking over. "You're going to regret this." "Doubt it," Carter said, his hands steady on the controls. "Let's see what you've got, navigator." For the first time in years, Kaya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as she prepared to face the unknown. The Stardust roared to life, and Kaya realized she might have found something she didn't know she was searching for, a chance to fight again, to live again. The Stardust surged forward, engines groaning as Carter pushed the throttle to its limit. Kaya's claws gripped the console, her green-streaked hair clinging to her face as the ship rattled under the strain. Behind them, the raiders pursued relentlessly, their sleek ships dancing in formation like predators scenting blood. "They're not letting up," Kaya said, her voice taut. Her golden scales shimmered faintly in the cockpit's red emergency lighting, a telltale sign of her rising adrenaline. Carter's grin remained, though the sharpness in his eyes betrayed his focus. "They'll regret it soon enough," he said, flipping a switch to divert power to the rear shields. Kaya frowned, her claws tapping rapidly as she scanned the sensors. "Rear shields are already failing. You're buying us seconds, not minutes." "Seconds are all I need," Carter shot back, jerking the controls to the left. The Stardust veered hard, narrowly dodging a barrage of laser fire that streaked past the viewport. Kaya's stomach twisted at the sudden movement, but her instincts overrode her discomfort. Her hands danced over the controls, rerouting auxiliary power to stabilize the ship's systems. "This plan of yours better not involve crashing," she growled. "Crashing's plan B," Carter said, his voice tinged with humor. Kaya glared at him, but the corners of her mouth twitched despite herself. "You're infuriating." "Yeah, but you're still here," Carter replied, his tone smug. A loud warning alarm cut through their exchange. Kaya's eyes darted to the sensor display, where a new blip appeared, much closer than she expected. "They're flanking us," she barked. Carter cursed, slamming the controls forward. The ship bucked violently, sending Kaya lurching sideways. She caught herself on the edge of the console, her claws digging into the metal. "Hold on!" Carter yelled, twisting the ship into a sharp dive. The sudden maneuver pulled them into the shadow of a massive asteroid field, its jagged rocks spinning ominously against the blackness of space. "You're taking us into that?" Kaya demanded, her tail lashing against her seat in agitation. "They won't follow us," Carter said, his voice tight with determination. "Raiders don't like risking their shiny toys on debris fields." Kaya's eyes narrowed. "And if they do?" "Then we improvise," Carter said, flashing her a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. The Stardust plunged into the asteroid field, weaving between colossal chunks of rock. The cockpit shuddered with each near miss, the proximity alarms screaming in protest. Kaya's claws flew over the controls as she calculated trajectories and adjusted their path. "They're still on us," she said, glancing at the screen. The Raiders' ships followed, their pilots displaying a reckless precision that made Kaya's stomach tighten. Carter's grin faded as he focused on the task at hand. "Then let's make this interesting." He reached for a hidden panel on the console, revealing a row of switches Kaya hadn't seen before. She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Old tricks," Carter said, flicking a switch. The Stardust shuddered as a series of small, spiked devices launched from its underbelly, scattering into the field behind them. Kaya watched the screen as the devices detonated, releasing bursts of electromagnetic interference. The Raiders' ships wobbled, their systems faltering. One spun out of control, slamming into an asteroid with a fiery explosion. "Not bad," Kaya admitted grudgingly. "High praise," Carter said, his grin returning. Before she could respond, another impact rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from an overhead panel. Kaya flinched as the lights flickered, plunging the cockpit into momentary darkness. "Direct hit," she said, her voice clipped. "Shields are down to 20%. Carter cursed under his breath. "We're not out of this yet." Kaya's gaze darted to the sensor display. The remaining two raiders were regrouping, their ships moving to flank the Stardust once again. She gritted her teeth, her mind racing. "If we don't lose them soon, we're done," she said. "Suggestions?" Carter asked, glancing at her. Kaya hesitated, then pointed to a massive asteroid ahead. "That one, if we time it right, we can use its rotation to slingshot us out of here." Carter's eyebrows rose. "Bold move. Can you pull it off?" Kaya asked, her voice challenging. Carter smirked. "Watch me." He angled the ship toward the asteroid, its craggy surface looming larger with each passing second. Kaya's heart pounded as she monitored the sensors, her claws poised to make adjustments. The Stardust skimmed the asteroid's edge, its engine screaming as Carter pushed the throttle to maximum. The sudden burst of speed jolted them forward, the gravitational pull of the asteroid flinging them out of the debris field. The Raiders weren't so lucky. One of their ships clipped the asteroid, spiraling out of control before disintegrating in a fiery explosion. The last ship hesitated, its pilot clearly reconsidering the pursuit. "They're falling back," Kaya said, her voice laced with relief. Carter leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath. "Told you we'd make it." Kaya shot him a sidelong glance. "You were sweating." "Never," Carter said, but the faint sheen on his forehead betrayed him. The tension in the cockpit lingered, a charged undercurrent that neither of them acknowledged aloud. Kaya's scales still glowed faintly, her adrenaline refusing to fade completely. Carter turned to her, his grin softer now. "You know, you're not bad under pressure." Kaya arched an eyebrow. "Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment." Their gazes locked, the intensity of the moment sinking in. The danger had passed, but the air between them crackled with something unspoken. Carter reached out, his hand brushing hers where it rested on the console. Kaya stiffened, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You're full of surprises," she said quietly. "So are you," Carter replied, his voice low. Kaya hesitated, her instincts warring with the pull she felt toward him. Slowly, she leaned closer, the faint scent of engine grease and adrenaline mingling between them. Carter didn't move, his eyes searching hers as if daring her to take the next step. Before she could second-guess herself, Kaya closed the distance, her lips brushing his in a hesitant but electric kiss. Carter responded immediately, his hand moving to the back of her neck, his touch firm yet gentle. The kiss deepened, a rush of heat cutting through the cold remnants of fear and tension. When they finally pulled apart, Kaya's scales shimmered, and Carter's grin returned, softer but no less infuriating. "Well," he said, his voice a little breathless, "that's one way to celebrate surviving." Kaya smirked, her claws tapping the console. "Don't get used to it." "Too late," Carter said, his grin widening. Kaya rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress the small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in years, she felt alive, the weight of her past momentarily lifted. The Stardust cruised through the calm expanse of space, its engines humming softly after the chaos of the chase. The cockpit lights had dimmed to a soothing blue, casting faint shadows across Kaya's face as she stared out at the stars. The adrenaline had faded, but the tension lingered, unspoken and heavy. Carter leaned back in the pilot's chair, his hands behind his head, a faint grin still playing on his lips. "You're quiet," he said, breaking the silence. Kaya didn't look at him. Her golden eyes remained fixed on the viewport. "I'm thinking." "About what?" Her tail flicked once, betraying her agitation. "About how close we came to dying. About how reckless you are. About how I'm still here." Carter chuckled, the sound low and warm. "You're welcome." Kaya finally turned, her sharp gaze locking onto his. "For what?" "For keeping us alive," he said, "and for making it look easy." Her lips twitched, but she refused to smile. "You call nearly crashing into an asteroid easy?" "Easier than letting them catch us," Carter replied, his grin widening. Kaya shook her head, exasperated but unable to suppress the faintest hint of amusement. She leaned back in her chair, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "You're impossible." "And you're predictable," Carter teased. Her eyes narrowed. "Predictable?" He nodded, his grin softening. "You always assume the worst. Not just about me, but about everything." Kaya bristled, her scales darkening slightly. "That's called survival. Where I come from, assuming the worst keeps you alive." Carter's grin faded, replaced by something more serious. "Where you come from isn't here." She stiffened, her tail curling around the base of her chair. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "It means you don't have to keep carrying all of it," he said quietly. "The weight, the fear. You got a ship now, a partner. You're not alone anymore." Kaya's chest tightened at his words. She looked away, her gaze falling to the navigation console. "You say that like it's easy to let go." "It's not." Carter admitted, his voice soft. But it's possible. Kaya didn't respond, her mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. The vulnerability in Carter's voice unnerved her as much as the truth of his words. The silence stretched between them until the faint beep of an alert broke it. Carter straightened, his grin returning as he checked the display. Looks like we got a job waiting for us. The client wants a delivery run to Ceres 5. Kaya frowned, glancing at the coordinates. That's a long haul. Pays well, Carter said. Plus, it gives us time to fix some of the damage those raiders left behind. Kaya hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but if I'm going to be stuck on this ship for that long, we're setting some ground rules. Carter raised an eyebrow. Ground rules? Yes, Kaya said firmly, standing and crossing her arms. First, no surprises. If you're going to do something reckless, I want to know about it beforehand. Where's the fun in that? Carter said, though the teasing edge in his voice was softer now. I'm serious, Kaya said, her tone brooking no argument. All right, Carter relented, holding up his hands in mock surrender. What else? No touching the navigation console without my permission, she said. Carter smirked. I can live with that. Anything else? Kaya hesitated, her tail flicking behind her. And don't think that kiss means anything. Carter's smirk widened. You're the one who kissed me. Her golden scales flared briefly, and she turned on her heel, heading toward the exit. Just don't forget the rules, she called over her shoulder. Carter laughed, the sound echoing through the cockpit. Whatever you say, Kaya. As she stepped into the corridor, Kaya's heart pounded, the memory of their earlier kiss lingering in her mind. She pressed her claws to her temple, willing the thoughts away. You're being ridiculous, she muttered to herself. Still, as she made her way to her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't entirely sure where she stood or where she wanted to go. Kaya lay on the narrow bunk in her quarters, the dim light casting soft shadows on the walls. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the day. The chase, the escape, the kiss. The sound of footsteps in the corridor broke her reverie. She sat up as Carter appeared in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the faint glow of the hallway. You should be sleeping, he said, leaning casually against the doorframe. So should you, Kaya replied, her tone guarded. Carter shrugged. Couldn't. Thought I'd check on you. I'm fine, Kaya said quickly. He stepped inside, his presence filling the small room. You're terrible at lying. You know that? Kaya crossed her arms, glaring at him. What do you want, Carter? To talk, he said simply. About what? About whatever's keeping you up, Carter said, his voice softening. Kaya hesitated, her claws tapping against her arm. I'm not used to this, she admitted finally. The quiet, the safety. It feels wrong. Carter sat on the edge of the bunk, careful to keep some distance between them. It's not wrong, Kaya. It's new. That's different. She glanced at him, her golden eyes searching his face. And what happens when it's gone? It won't be, Carter said, his voice steady. Not as long as I'm here. Kaya's chest tightened, the weight of his words pressing against her defenses. She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. You don't know that. I do, Carter said, his tone firm. He reached out, his hand brushing hers. We've got this, Kaya. Together. She met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes cutting through her doubts. For a moment, she let herself believe him. Maybe, she said softly, her fingers brushing against his. Carter smiled, his touch lingering for just a moment before he stood. Get some sleep, navigator. We got a long trip ahead. Kaya watched him go, her heart heavy yet lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of hope, a fragile thing, but real. The Stardust sailed through the star-speckled void, its engines humming steadily as it glided towards Ceres 5. The long-haul journey had settled into an uneasy calm, with Kaya and Carter falling into a rhythm of quiet cooperation. Kaya sat in the cockpit, her eyes scanning the navigation console. The faint glow of the controls painted her violet skin in soft hues, contrasting the golden shimmer of her scales as they caught the ambient light. She traced the edges of the star chart absently, her mind wandering to the weight of her choices. Footsteps echoed behind her. She glanced back to see Carter entering, his casual stride betraying none of the tension she knew he must feel. He carried 2 mugs, the steam rising from them curling like ghostly tendrils in the dim light. "Coffee," he said, handing one to her. Kaya accepted it without a word, her fingers brushing his briefly as she took the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, grounding her in the moment. "You're quiet today," Carter said, easing into the pilot's chair. Kaya sipped the bitter brew, letting the silence stretch. "Thinking," she finally said. "About?" She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the viewport where distant stars blinked like ancient beacons. "About where this ends. What happens when we run out of luck." Carter tilted his head, his eyes studying her. "You think we're running on luck?" "Luck, skill, desperation," Kaya said with a faint smirk. "Take your pick." Carter chuckled. "I'd bet on us any day." "You're tougher than you think, Kaya." Kaya shook her head, setting the mug aside. "Tough doesn't keep you alive forever." Before Carter could respond, an alarm blared, cutting through the quiet. Both of them snapped to attention, their hands flying to the controls. "Proximity alert," Kaya said, her claws tapping rapidly as she scanned the readings. "We got company." Carter frowned, his eyes narrowing at the screen. A large ship loomed ahead, its angular design bristling with weaponry. Its dark hull bore no insignias, a telltale sign of mercenaries or worse. "Not raiders," Carter muttered. "This is something else." The comm system crackled to life, a harsh voice filling the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel. This is the Harbinger. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Kaya's scales flared, her golden hue brightening in a mix of fear and anger. "Mercenaries?" "Worse," Carter said grimly. "Bounty hunters." Kaya's stomach sank. Her past surged to the forefront of her mind. The war, the factions, the alliances broken as quickly as they were formed. She had thought she was just another refugee, forgotten in the chaos. Apparently, she was wrong. "Why are they after us?" she demanded. "They're not," Carter said, his tone grim. "They're after you." Kaya froze, her heart pounding. "How do you know?" "Call it a hunch," Carter said, flipping switches to power the Stardust defenses. "Or maybe the fact that they're broadcasting your name over the encrypted comm channel." Kaya's claws clenched the edge of the console. "How do they know who I am?" Carter glanced at her, his eyes sharp. "You tell me." "I don't know," Kaya said, her voice rising. "I've been running for years." "I thought." The Harbinger fired a warning shot, the blast shaking the Stardust as it grazed their shields. "Save it for later," Carter said, his voice cutting through her panic. "Right now, we need a plan." Kaya forced herself to focus, her mind racing. "We can't fight them. That ship has us outgunned 10-1. "Then we run," Carter said, his hands flying over the controls. Kaya studied the sensor readings, her claws tapping a frantic rhythm. "There's a debris field 2 clicks ahead. If we can make it there, we might lose them." Carter nodded, pushing the throttle to maximum. The Stardust surged forward, its engines roaring as the bounty hunters opened fire. The cockpit rattled with each impact, sparks flying from the overhead panels. Kaya rerouted power to the shields, her claws a blur across the console. "They're gaining," she said, her voice tight. Carter's jaw clenched. Not for long. The Stardust dove into the debris field, a chaotic maze of twisted metal and shattered ship remains. The bounty hunters hesitated at the edge, their ship too large to navigate the narrow passages easily. Kaya guided Carter through the field, her navigation skills tested to their limits. "Left," she called. "Now hard right." Carter followed her commands without question, his movements precise despite the chaos. The Harbinger fired blindly, its shots scattering debris and sending fragments hurtling in every direction. One piece struck the Stardust wing, causing the ship to lurch violently. "Stabilizers are failing," Kaya said, her voice strained. "Keep us moving," Carter replied, his grip on the controls unwavering. Kaya's claws flew over the console, rerouting power to compensate for the damage. Sweat beaded on her brow as she calculated their path, her focus absolute. Finally, The sensor readings showed the edge of the debris field approaching. Kaya's chest tightened as she spotted an opening wide enough for the stardust to squeeze through. "There," she said, pointing. "That's our exit." Carter nodded, steering the ship toward the opening. The Harbinger hesitated, its massive bulk unable to follow. As the stardust burst into open space, Kaya let out a shaky breath. "We made it." "Not yet," Carter said, his voice grim. He pointed to the screen, where the Harbinger lingered at the edge of the debris field, its weapons powering up for a final shot. Kaya's mind raced. "We need to disable their targeting systems." "How?" Carter asked. Kaya's golden eyes glinted with determination. "Trust me." She tapped into the Stardust's limited arsenal, launching a small, spherical device toward the Harbinger. The device detonated, releasing a cloud of electromagnetic interference. The Harbinger's systems flickered, its weapons falling silent. Carter let out a low whistle. "Not bad." Kaya smirked, her scales glowing faintly. "Told you I'm good under pressure." As the Stardust sped away, leaving the bounty hunters behind, Kaya allowed herself a moment to breathe. She turned to Carter, her expression serious. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until they have me." Carter met her gaze, his voice steady. "Then they'll have to get through me first." Kaya's chest tightened at his words, the weight of his promise sinking in. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear, something that scared her even more. Hope. The Stardust drifted in the shadow of a vast nebula, its engines idling as Kaya and Carter worked silently in the cockpit. The faint hum of the ship seemed louder in the stillness, a reminder of the chaos they had narrowly escaped. Kaya leaned over the navigation console, her claws deftly inputting coordinates for Ceres 5. The proximity of the nebula provided cover, shielding them from long-range scans, but she couldn't shake the tension in her chest. The bounty hunters would return. They always did. "They'll track us again," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet but firm, each word laced with certainty. Carter glanced at her from the pilot's chair, his expression calm. "Let them. We'll be ready." Kaya shook her head, her green-streaked hair falling over her face. "You don't understand. They won't stop. Not until they've dragged me back, dead or alive. Then we make sure they don't get the chance," Carter said, his voice steady. Kaya turned to him, her golden eyes narrowing. "You say that like it's easy, like this won't keep happening." "It doesn't have to," Carter said, leaning forward. "You just have to trust me." Kaya opened her mouth to argue, but his words gave her pause. Trust. It felt foreign to her, a fragile concept she'd buried long ago. Yet here he was still by her side after everything. She exhaled slowly, her claws releasing the edge of the console. "You have a plan?" Carter grinned, though it lacked his usual bravado. "Something like that. But I'll need your help." Kaya arched an eyebrow. "Go on." Carter tapped a few keys on the central display, pulling up a map of Ceres 5. The planet's surface gleamed with networks of sprawling cities and thick jungles, each marked with faint symbols. He pointed to a remote outpost nestled near a mountain range. "This is an old smuggler's den," he explained. "They owe me a favor or two. We can retrofit the Stardust with some upgrades. New cloaking tech, better shields, the works." "And the bounty hunters?" Kaya asked. "We'll feed them a false trail," Carter said. "If we're lucky, they'll spend weeks chasing shadows while we disappear." Kaya studied the map, her tail flicking thoughtfully. "And if we're not lucky, then we fight," Carter said simply. Kaya met his gaze, her heart pounding. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt. For the first time in years, someone wasn't running away from her problems. He was running toward them. Ceres 5's jungle air was thick and humid, clinging to Kaya's skin as she and Carter approached the outpost. The structure was little more than a fortified bunker, hidden beneath layers of vegetation. Vines snaked across the metal walls, disguising its true purpose. The pair stepped inside, greeted by the acrid smell of burnt circuitry and the low hum of machinery. A wiry alien with 4 arms and glowing blue eyes looked up from a cluttered workbench, his expression shifting from suspicion to recognition. "Carter," the alien said, his voice gravelly. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Miss me, Varix? Carter asked, flashing a grin. Varix snorted. Not in the slightest. What do you want? A favor, Carter said, gesturing to the stardust visible through the open door. She needs upgrades. Cloaking, shields, anything you've got. Varix's eyes narrowed. This isn't charity, Carter. What's in it for me? 10 crates of industrial-grade fuel, Carter said, and a promise that I won't ask you for anything else. The alien considered this, his gaze drifting to Kaya. And her? Who's she? Kaya's scales flared faintly, but she held her ground. Someone who's tired of running. Varix chuckled. Fair enough. You got a deal. As Varix and his crew worked on the stardust, Kaya and Carter lingered outside the bunker. The jungle buzzed with life, the sounds of unseen creatures echoing through the thick foliage. Kaya leaned against a tree, her arms crossed as she watched Carter pace. What happens after this? She asked. Carter stopped, turning to her. We get off their radar. Find somewhere safe. Start over. Start over. Kaya repeated, her voice skeptical. Yeah, Carter said, stepping closer. You've been running for so long, Kaya. Don't you want something different? She hesitated, her claws tracing the edge of her sleeve. I don't even know what that looks like anymore. Carter's gaze softened. Then let's figure it out. Together. Kaya looked up at him, her golden eyes searching his face. His words carried weight, an honesty that left her defenses crumbling. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because you're worth it, Carter said, his voice steady. Kaya's chest tightened, the weight of his words sinking in. For years, she had been a survivor, defined by loss and fear. Now, someone saw her as more than that, as someone worth saving. She stepped closer, the space between them vanishing. You're impossible, she murmured. And you're stubborn, Carter said, a faint grin tugging at his lips. Kaya smirked, then closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a kiss that carried all the things she couldn't say. When the stardust lifted off from Ceres 5, it felt like a different ship. The new systems hummed quietly, the controls more responsive than ever. Kaya sat in the co-pilot's seat, her claws dancing over the console as she plotted their next course. Where to navigate her? Carter asked, his voice light. Kaya glanced at him, her golden eyes glinting. Somewhere they'll never find us. Carter nodded, his grin widening. I like the sound of that. As the stardust disappeared into the star-speckled void, Kaya felt a strange sense of peace. The past still lingered, its shadows long and heavy, but for the first time, she wasn't carrying it alone. Carter's voice broke the silence. You know, we make a good team. Kaya smirked, her tail flicking in amusement. Don't let it go to your head. His laughter filled the cockpit, a sound that made the stars feel a little brighter. Together, they faced the unknown, not as two people running from their pasts, but as a team daring to carve out a future. For Kaya, it wasn't just the beginning of a journey. It was the beginning of hope.